My phone buzzed on the hospital bedside table. I reached for it slowly, careful not to disturb the 4-needle in my arm. The doctor had been clear. Complete rest for at least 2 weeks. My body had finally given up after months of pushing too hard. The email notification showed HR's generic address. I opened it, expecting a get well message or maybe some paperwork about my medical leave. Instead I saw, termination of employment, effective immediately. My heart stopped. I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood. But there it was, cold and formal. My position was terminated due to extended unavailability and inability to fulfill active duties. Attached was a note from Michael Trent, the CEO who joined our company 6 months ago. Ava, while we appreciate your past contributions, we need leadership that can be present. Best wishes for your recovery. Best, Michael. Best wishes. As if he hadn't just fired me while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from exhaustion his deadlines had caused. I stared at the white ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. 3 years of my life. My project. My design. Gone in a 2-paragraph email. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. 6 months earlier everything had been different. I walked into the office at 7 every morning, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another day of building something revolutionary. Our renewable battery grid wasn't just another tech project. It was going to change how rural communities access clean energy. I was the project manager, the one who'd spent 2 years refining the algorithm that made efficient solar storage possible. The team relied on me. The CEO valued me. I was doing work that mattered. Then the board brought in Michael Trent. He arrived in an expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive smile. Fresh from a Fortune 500 energy company. He was supposed to streamline operations and bring enterprise experience to our growing startup. The CEO introduced him as our new CEO, someone who could help us scale. Michael walked through the office like he owned it, shaking hands, memorizing names. When he got to my desk he paused. Ava Reed, he said, reading my nameplate. You're the battery grid lead. That's right. He smiled. I've heard good things. You're the kind of talent that can make a man look good. I thought he was complimenting the team. I didn't realize he meant it literally. The changes started small. Michael began sitting in on my meetings, claiming he wanted to understand the project dynamics. He'd listen quietly, nodding, taking notes. At first, I appreciated having executive support. Then he started speaking for me. In a client presentation I'd prepared for weeks, Michael interrupted halfway through. What Ava means to say is, and he'd rephrase my exact point, making it sound more confident, more polished. The clients responded to him. He had that charisma, that voice that commanded attention. After the meeting, he patted my shoulder. Great work setting that up. I just helped land it. I found my name gradually disappearing from project documents. Reports I'd written were resubmitted with revised by M. Trent in the metadata. Email chains I'd started suddenly included him as the primary contact. My colleagues noticed but said nothing. Michael was executive leadership. Who was going to challenge him? I discovered a file in our shared drive labeled Battery Grid Trent's Vision. Inside were my designs, my calculations, my innovation timeline, all reformatted under his name. My chest tightened. But I said nothing. I needed this job. I needed this project to succeed. The workload became crushing. Michael scheduled deadline after deadline, each one impossible but necessary for investor confidence. When I pushed back, citing realistic timelines, he'd smile that patient smile. Ava, this is a leadership test. The best managers find a way. So I found a way. I worked 70-hour weeks. I stayed until midnight running simulations. I skipped meals, skipped sleep, skipped doctor's appointments I'd been putting off. My hands trembled from too much coffee. My vision blurred during long coding sessions. One morning, I stood up from my desk and the room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table, breathing hard. A coworker asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. That night I collapsed in the lab. The world went white, then black. Then I woke up on the floor, my head pounding, my phone ringing with missed calls. Someone had found me and called an ambulance. I barely remember the ride to the hospital. The doctor's face was serious when she showed me the test results. Severe exhaustion. Dangerously high stress levels. I was running my body into the ground, and if I didn't stop, the consequences would be permanent. You need complete rest. Minimum 2 weeks. No work, no screens, no stress. I sent the medical documentation to HR the next morning. I copied Michael on the email, explaining I'd be on leave as directed by my doctor. I felt guilty, like I was letting the team down. But I couldn't ignore the warning signs anymore. Michael replied within an hour. Take your time, Ava. Your health comes first. We'll manage things here. Get well soon. Felt sincere. Kind even. I exhaled, some of the tension leaving my shoulders. Maybe he understood. Maybe this was the wake-up call we both needed about sustainable work practices. I spent the first week sleeping. Really sleeping, not the fitful 3-hour stretches I'd been surviving on. 8 real meals. I walked outside without checking my phone every 5 minutes. Slowly, the fog in my head began to clear. On day 10, I opened LinkedIn to check messages from a few colleagues who'd sent well wishes. That's when I saw it. A company post from our official account. Michael stood in front of our prototype battery grid, arms crossed, confident smile. The caption read, "Proud to unveil the breakthrough our team has built under my leadership. The future of renewable energy starts here. #innovation, #leadership, #clean energy. My team. Under his leadership. My prototype. My design. My 3 years of work. Credited entirely to him." The hospital room came back into focus. I was sitting up in bed, laptop open, staring at that termination email. My medical leave wasn't even finished yet. They'd fired me while I was still recovering. I tried logging into my work account. Access denied. I tried the shared drive. Access denied. My company email bounced back as undeliverable. They'd cut me off completely overnight, while I slept in a hospital bed. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Ava. It's Tyler from IT. His voice was quiet, cautious. I know I'm not supposed to call, but thought you should know. They're filing the patent tomorrow. The battery grid algorithm. It's going through under Michael's name as primary inventor. My stomach dropped. That's my design. I filed a provisional patent years ago, before I even joined the company. I know. Remember. But legal's pushing it through fast. Like they want it done before anyone asks questions. I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking again, but not from exhaustion this time. From rage. From betrayal. From the sudden, crushing realization that everything I'd built was being stolen while I was too weak to fight back. I pulled out my old external hard drive from my bag. I spent hours searching through old files, folders I hadn't opened in years. My hands moved frantically across the keyboard, ignoring the protests from my still healing body. There had to be something. Proof. Documentation. Anything. Then I found it. Buried in a folder labeled Grad School Projects 2019. There it was. My original algorithm for optimized solar energy storage. The foundation of everything I'd later built at the company. Time-stamped 4 years before I'd even interviewed there. I'd filed a provisional patent back then, thinking maybe someday it would matter. It had expired before I could afford to renew it, but the filing date was there. Permanent. Documented. Proof that the core innovation was mine, developed independently before the company ever touched it. They'd built on top of my work. Improved it, sure. Scaled it, yes. But the foundation, the breakthrough that made everything else possible, that was mine. I called a lawyer the next morning. A friend of a friend who specialized in intellectual property theft. Can they patent something I invented years before joining? Yes. There was a long pause. Not legally. And if they already have, or if they're trying to, you have significant leverage. We need to move fast. We drafted a legal notice. Firm but professional. Asserting my rights, requesting documentation of their patent filing, and demanding they cease using my pre-existing intellectual property without proper attribution or compensation. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Michael called me within 3 hours. No email, no text. A direct call to my personal phone, which he'd never used before. Ava. His voice was cold. Different from the friendly tone he'd used in the office. Let's not complicate things. I'm not complicating anything. I'm protecting my work. Your work. He laughed, but it wasn't friendly. You developed that while employed by us. Everything you created belongs to the company. Not the foundation algorithm. I created that before I ever worked for you. The patent filing proves it. Silence. Then, quieter, more dangerous. You don't want to do this. You don't want to ruin your reputation in this industry. I have connections everywhere, Ava. If you fight me on this, you'll never work in clean energy again. No one will touch you. My heart pounded. Is that a threat? It's reality. Think carefully about your next move. He hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. He just threatened to blacklist me. To end my career if I didn't let him steal my work. I looked at my reflection in the darkened laptop screen. Ill. Exhausted. Beaten down. But not defeated. Not yet. That night I cried. Really cried, the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep and broken. My savings were running low. I had no job, no prospects, and apparently a powerful enemy who could torpedo any future opportunities. I deleted my LinkedIn profile. I couldn't face seeing Michael's posts, his interviews. His success built on my work while I sat alone and unemployed. For 3 days I barely moved. Questioned everything. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe fighting would only make things worse. Maybe Michael was right and I'd never work again. But on the 4th morning I woke up angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that sees clearly. Michael had said something once, back when he was pretending to be my mentor. Power belongs to whoever controls the narrative. He'd controlled my narrative for 6 months. He'd taken my work, my credit, my health. It was time to take it back. I opened my laptop and pulled up my old files. All of them. I started sketching improvements to my original algorithm, refinements I'd thought about but never had time to implement. Without the company's resources, without their constraints, without Michael's impossible deadlines. Just me and the work I loved. The work that was always mine. I reached out to Eli Navarro, an investor I'd met at a conference 3 years ago. Back before I joined the company, when I was just a grad student with big ideas and no funding. He'd given me his card and said, "If you ever want to build something real, call me." I'd never called. I'd taken the safe route, the stable job, the security of an established company. Now I had nothing to lose. We met at a quiet coffee shop. Eli looked older but his eyes were still sharp, still curious. I pitched him my improved algorithm. Faster charging times, longer storage capacity, and lower production costs than anything currently on the market, including what my old company was about to launch. "This is good," he said, studying my projections. "Really good. But you'd need to prove it works. Build a prototype, run tests, show real results. I can do it in 3 months. With what money? With yours. If you believe in it." He smiled. Same fearless kid I met 3 years ago. "All right. I'll fund the prototype phase. 3 months. If it works, we scale. If it doesn't, we part as friends. Deal?" I shook his hand. "Deal." 2 weeks later, I signed incorporation papers for Reed Energy Solutions. Name. My company. My second chance. Building a startup from nothing was harder than I'd imagined. Every day brought new problems. Suppliers who didn't take me seriously. Software bugs that took days to debug. Equipment that broke down at critical moments. Investors who looked at my small operation and saw risk, not potential. I maxed out credit cards. I worked from a rented garage that flooded whenever it rained. I ate ramen for dinner and tried not to think about the comfortable salary I'd lost. Then, scrolling through tech news one sleepless night, I saw Michael on CNBC. He sat in a leather chair, perfectly groomed, discussing his breakthrough in renewable energy storage. The interviewer called him a visionary. He smiled modestly and said the key was years of dedicated research and innovative thinking. Years, my research, my thinking. I watched the whole interview, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. He never mentioned my name. Never acknowledged the team that actually built it. Just spoke about his vision, his leadership, his innovation. The interviewer asked about competition. Michael laughed. We're years ahead of anyone else in the market. No one's even close. Closed the laptop. Opened my notebook. Went back to work. We'll see about that, I muttered. Week 11. My prototype finally held a charge longer than any commercial battery currently available. Not just marginally better, significantly better. 20% longer storage, 15% faster charging, and it cost 30% less to produce. It worked. It actually worked. Eli saw the test results and immediately called 3 of his investor contacts. We secured a small government innovation grant. Then a clean energy fund invested. Then a venture capital firm specializing in sustainable tech. Money started flowing. Slowly at first, then faster. We hired 2 engineers. Then 3 more. We moved from my garage to a small office space. We filed new patents, these ones entirely mine, entirely legitimate. 6 months after my termination, a tech journalist reached out. She'd heard rumors about a new player in renewable storage. Could she do a feature? Said yes. The article published 2 weeks later. Former industry insider develops battery technology that outperforms current market leaders. The article was fair, detailed, and technical. It never mentioned my old company by name. Never mentioned Michael. Just focused on the innovation, the breakthrough, the potential. The response was immediate. My inbox flooded with investor inquiries. Industry forums buzzed with discussions. And Michael's company stock dropped 7% the next trading day. The attention grew faster than I expected. More articles. More interviews. I kept my tone professional, gracious, focused on the technology rather than personal drama. I never mentioned Michael's name. Never discussed what happened. Just talked about innovation, sustainability, and the future of clean energy. Somehow that made the story even more compelling. People started digging into my background. They found out I'd worked at Michael's company. They connected the dots. Reddit threads speculated about what really happened. Industry insiders began sharing their own stories about Michael's management style. I didn't feed any of it. I just kept working, kept building, kept proving that my technology was better. The contrast spoke for itself. The professional focusing on innovation versus the self-promoter who'd built his reputation on other people's work. Investors loved the narrative. Customers loved the product. Within 8 months, Reed Energy Solutions had secured contracts with 3 major utility companies. Michael's stock continued falling. 10%. 15%. Word spread that their technology wasn't as revolutionary as promised, that they'd overstated capabilities, that actual deployment was hitting major issues. Issues I could have warned them about if I'd still been there. Issues I'd already solved in my improved design. I didn't celebrate their struggles. But I didn't feel bad about them either. I learned through industry contacts that Michael had been fired. Not publicly, not dramatically. Just quietly transitioned out after a financial misstep. He'd pushed an aggressive expansion that drained resources and delivered poor results. The board lost confidence. They gave him a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. He disappeared from the tech news cycle. No more CNBC interviews. No more thought leadership posts. Just silence. Felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Just a quiet sense that the universe had a way of balancing scales. Reed Energy Solutions kept growing. We opened a second office. Hired 30 employees. Began developing next-generation models. My calendar filled with partnership discussions, acquisition offers, merger talks. One email stood out. From Thermos Energy, a mid-sized renewable company I'd heard of but never worked with. They wanted to discuss a potential merger. Their infrastructure and distribution network combined with our technology could reshape the market. I scheduled a call with their leadership team. Eli warned me to be careful, to review their finances thoroughly. These discussions could take months, he said. Maybe years. The preliminary talks went well. They seemed stable, professional, genuinely interested in our technology. We signed NDAs, scheduled in-person meetings, started due diligence. Then I learned something that made me pause. Michael Trent had joined Thermos Energy 3 months ago as VP of Operations. My past was about to collide with my present. I could have backed out, found a different partner, avoided the confrontation. But Thermos Energy's distribution network was exactly what we needed to scale nationally. Walking away would set us back years. Eli asked, "Can you handle seeing him again?" I thought about the hospital bed, the termination email, the stolen credit, the threats, the months of rebuilding from nothing. "Yes," I said. "I can handle it." We continued negotiations. The terms became increasingly favorable for Reed Energy Solutions. Our technology was that valuable, that ahead of the market. Thermos needed us more than we needed them. My lawyers discovered during due diligence that Thermos was struggling financially. Michael's aggressive project spending had created cash flow problems. They needed our innovation and our investor relationships to survive. That gave us leverage. Significant leverage. We restructured the deal. Instead of a merger of equals, it became an acquisition. Reed Energy Solutions would absorb Thermos, keeping their infrastructure but taking control of operations and leadership. Eli looked at the final terms. "This makes you their CEO. I know. You'll be Michael's boss. I know that too." He studied my face. "Is this about revenge?" "No," I said honestly. "It's about building the best company possible. Thermos has what we need. We have what they need. Michael just happens to be there. And if he's not happy about reporting to you," smiled, "that's not really my problem, is it?" The final negotiations took place at Thermos Energy's headquarters in downtown Seattle. Glass building, modern design, impressive views. I walked through their lobby with Eli and my CFO, our footsteps echoing on polished floors. Their board greeted us in a conference room that overlooked Puget Sound. Professional handshakes, polite small talk. They seemed nervous. They needed this deal to work. I began my presentation, outlining how Reed Energy's technology would integrate with their infrastructure. I detailed cost savings, efficiency improvements, market expansion opportunities. The board members nodded, asked questions, seemed impressed. Halfway through, the door opened. Someone slipped into a chair near the back. I glanced up from my slides. Froze. Michael Trent sat there, arms folded, face carefully neutral. But his eyes widened when he saw me. His mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. No sound came out. No one else seemed to notice the tension. The board chairman smiled. "Ah, Michael. Glad you could join us. This is Ava Reed, CEO of Reed Energy Solutions." "We've met," I said calmly. Then I continued my presentation as if nothing had happened. Michael's face went through several expressions. Confusion, calculation, then something like fear, because he was finally understanding, finally realizing. I wasn't here to work for him. I was here to acquire his company. The meeting ended. The board seemed satisfied. They stepped out to deliberate privately. That left us in the conference room. Me, Eli, my CFO, Michael, and 2 other Thermos executives who seemed oblivious to the history. Michael stood abruptly. "Can I speak with you? Privately?" I glanced at Eli. He nodded slightly. I followed Michael into an empty office down the hall. He closed the door, turned to face me. "What are you doing here, Ava?" "Negotiating an acquisition. Don't play games. This is my company now. It won't be for long." His face reddened. "Is this revenge? You're doing this to humiliate me." I looked at him calmly. I'm doing this because Reed Energy needs distribution infrastructure and Thermos has it. This is business, Michael. Purely business. Bullshit. You planned this. No, I said. You planned this. When you fired me from a hospital bed. When you stole my work. When you threatened to blacklist me. You created this situation. I'm just finishing what you started. He stepped closer, voice lowering. I can make this difficult. I have allies on the board. Do you? Because from what I see, your aggressive spending put this company on the edge of collapse. My technology and investor network are the only things saving it. So tell me, Michael, who do you think the board values more? The VP who nearly bankrupted them, or the CEO bringing the solution? His jaw clenched. He had no answer, because we both knew the truth. Open the door. We'll announce the acquisition in 30 days. I suggest you start updating your resume. The acquisition moved forward quickly. Thermos's board accepted our terms. Their shareholders approved the deal. Lawyers filed paperwork. Press releases were drafted. Michael tried to position himself as integral to the transition. He gave interviews about his role in Thermos's transformation, claiming credit for bringing Reed Energy to the table. The same playbook he'd used before. But this time the narrative didn't stick. Too many people knew the real story. Too many industry insiders had connected the dots. Michael's reputation was already damaged from his previous company's failures. Now he looked desperate, clinging to relevance. Meanwhile, Reed Energy's value tripled. Our technology was proven, our leadership was solid, and the market rewarded us for it. We became the company everyone in clean energy wanted to work with or invest in. I spent those 30 days preparing, reviewing Thermos's operations, identifying inefficiencies, planning integration strategies. I wasn't coming in as a conqueror. I was coming in as a builder. But I was also coming in as Michael's superior. That detail wasn't lost on anyone. The day before the official announcement, I received an email from Thermos's HR director. They discovered documentation of Michael's pattern of taking credit for others' work. Not just with me. With multiple employees over the years. The pattern was clear, consistent, damaging. HR wanted guidance on how to proceed. I read the email twice. Then I wrote back. Follow your standard procedures for documented misconduct. This isn't personal. It's professional accountability. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Formal announcement of the acquisition, introduction of new leadership structure, Q&A session with key stakeholders. Michael arrived early. I watched him through the glass walls as he sat near the head of the table, checking his phone, trying to look confident. He didn't know yet. The board had kept the final leadership structure confidential until this moment. The room filled. Board members. Department heads, senior management, everyone who mattered at Thermos Energy. Michael nodded at people, shook hands, played the part of the insider who belonged. The chairman called the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Today marks a significant moment in Thermos Energy's evolution. The acquisition by Reed Energy Solutions is now complete. I'm pleased to introduce the CEO of our newly merged organization, who will outline our path forward. He gestured toward the door. I walked in. The room went still. Several people gasped. Michael's face drained of color. He half stood, then sat back down, clearly fighting to maintain composure. Good morning, I said, stepping to the podium. I'm Ava Reed. It's good to see everyone. Michael, I added, making direct eye contact. Good to see you again. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I began my presentation. Professional, forward-looking, focused on innovation, integration, and the future we'd build together. Michael didn't interrupt once. After the meeting, HR met with Michael privately. I didn't attend. Eli handled that discussion as our chief operating officer. What I learned later was that they'd presented him with documented evidence of his misconduct over the years. Performance issues. Credit theft. Problematic management style. None of it came from me. It was all there in their files, their emails, their records. They just never looked carefully before. Or maybe they'd looked but hadn't wanted to act. Now they had to act. Because the new leadership structure had no tolerance for that behavior. We were building something different. Michael was given a choice. Resign with a severance package or be terminated for cause. Either way, his position was dissolved. The VP of Operations role would be restructured and eventually filled by someone else. He chose resignation, signed the papers, cleaned out his desk, left the building. I heard about it secondhand. I was in a different meeting discussing technology integration. Someone mentioned it in passing. "Oh, by the way, Michael Trent resigned this afternoon." He nodded, said, "I hope he finds what he's looking for." And I meant it. Not because I forgave him, but because I was done carrying the weight of what he'd done. I had a company to run, team to lead, a vision to execute. My energy was better spent on that. The industry news exploded. Headlines ranged from clean energy startup acquires former employer's competitor to fired engineer returns as CEO. Reporters wanted interviews. Podcasts wanted me as a guest. Business schools wanted case studies. I agreed to some, declined others. When I did speak publicly, I focused on innovation, resilience, and ethical leadership. I talked about building sustainable businesses, not just sustainable energy. I emphasized the importance of valuing people, not just patents. I never mentioned Michael by name. Never detailed what he'd done. Just spoke broadly about the lessons I'd learned from challenges and setbacks. Somehow, that restraint made the story more powerful. People filled in the gaps themselves. The narrative became legendary in clean energy circles. The project manager who was fired while sick rebuilt from nothing and ended up acquiring the company that employed the man who'd fired her. Reed Energy Solutions valuation soared. Investors lined up. Recruitment became easy. Talented people wanted to work for a company with that kind of culture and leadership. Thermos's infrastructure integrated smoothly with our technology. The merger was working. We were becoming the force in renewable energy I'd always dreamed of building. One journalist asked if I had a message for other leaders in the industry. I looked directly into the camera. Underestimate integrity at your own risk. The clip went viral. 3 months after the acquisition, I received a letter. Handwritten. Mailed to our corporate office. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope. Michael's. I almost threw it away. Almost let it sit unopened in a drawer. But curiosity won. I opened it alone in my office after everyone else had left for the day. The letter was short. Just 3 sentences. You won. I know you won't believe this, but I'm sorry. I hope your company succeeds. No excuses. No justifications. No attempts to rewrite history. Just those 3 sentences. I read it twice. Then I folded it, tucked it in a drawer and locked it. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The conversation was over. Had been over for a long time. I looked out my office window at the Seattle skyline. The city lights reflected off Puget Sound. Same view I'd had from that hospital bed when everything fell apart. 2 years. It had been 2 years since that termination email. 2 years of rebuilding, fighting, proving myself. 2 years of turning the worst moment of my career into the foundation of something better. My health was back. My company was thriving. My team respected me. The work I'd created was changing the industry, helping communities, making a difference. Michael was somewhere else, doing something else. And that was fine. I had won. But more importantly, I'd built something worth winning. The following months blurred together in the best way. Successful product launches, new partnerships, expansion into international markets. Reed Energy Solutions became synonymous with innovation and integrity. I hired carefully, building a culture that valued work-life balance as much as results. No one was expected to work 70-hour weeks. No one was pushed to exhaustion. When someone needed medical leave, they got it with full support and job security. We created mentorship programs, profit-sharing plans, clear attribution policies so everyone's contributions were recognized. The company I'd been denied became the company I built better. Industry awards started coming. CEO of the Year. Most innovative clean energy company. Best place to work in tech. Each recognition felt validating but also slightly surreal. I was the same person who'd been fired via email. Now I was on magazine covers. The transformation wasn't lost on me. Or on anyone who'd followed the story. At a leadership summit 6 months after the acquisition, I was invited to give the keynote speech. The auditorium was packed. Industry leaders, investors, entrepreneurs, students, people who wanted to understand how someone could fall so far and climb so much higher. I stood at that podium and told them the truth. 2 years ago, I was fired while recovering from exhaustion in a hospital bed. My work was stolen. My reputation was attacked. My future in this industry looked impossible. The room was silent. Everyone knew this story. But hearing it directly in my own words made it real in a different way. I spent weeks believing I'd lost everything. And in some ways I had. I'd lost my job, my security, my health. But I hadn't lost the one thing that mattered most. I hadn't lost my ability to create value. I paused, looking out at hundreds of faces. The person who fired me thought he could take credit for my work and erase me from the story. What he didn't understand was that work isn't about credit. It's about capability. And capability can't be stolen. It can only be demonstrated. I told them about the rebuild. The garage workspace. The failed prototypes. The maxed credit cards. The investors who said no. The technology that finally worked. The team that believed in the vision. Success isn't about revenge, I said. It's about refusing to let someone else define your worth. When they said I was done, I decided to prove otherwise. Not to punish them. To remind myself. The applause started before I finished. A standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. I stood there, steady and strong, no longer the fired project manager but the CEO who'd transformed pain into purpose. After the speech, walking to my car through the Seattle evening, I passed the building where it all began. My old company's headquarters. The place where I'd worked myself sick. Where Michael had built his reputation on my innovation. Where everything collapsed. The building looks smaller now. Less imposing. Just another office building in a city full of them. Paused, looking up at the windows. Lights still on. People still working. The company still existed, still functioned. They'd moved on without me. Life continued. But their trajectory had changed when I left. They'd lost their most valuable asset and didn't realize until it was too late. Now they were struggling, cutting costs, trying to compete with the very person they discarded. I didn't feel satisfaction. Felt peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've built something genuine, something lasting, something worth all the struggle. My phone buzzed. Eli, asking about tomorrow's investor meeting. I typed back a quick response and kept walking toward my car. The city lights reflected off the water. The air was cool, clean. Somewhere behind me in that building, my old life existed like a ghost. Somewhere ahead, my future waited. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove forward. The headline would write itself. The speech would be quoted for years. The story would inspire people facing their own betrayals and setbacks. But the truth was simpler than any story. He took my job when I was weak. I built an empire while he was watching. And that made all the difference.